I'm joined by Mauisnake to talk a bit about Astralis. So first of all, what's happening at Astralis?
Well, it seems like a pretty desperate move right now to just find any sort of change with bringing in HooXi. Obviously, the cadiaN stint was not working out. No one looked even happy beyond the fact that the results were well beneath what Astralis should be accomplishing, and the lack of major qualification had to be the final straw.
Yeah, because can you try to put some perspective and words on this Astralis downfall from winning 4 majors to now missing 5 in a row?
I feel like a lot of them, in some ways I actually would say Astralis got a little bit unlucky. Some of it is up to their own management and the players that they picked to represent them throughout certain events. I mean, last one, for example, I would say is on the unluckier side of Device, or the Shanghai one was unlucky because Device was just sick. I don't know what you can really do about that. But then I would say the one directly before that would be their fault because they had BlameF as an in-game leader. And I don't think that many people, after what he did with Complexity, had the most faith in him in that role anymore. Like, they just knew it was limited. Other ones where they were throwing together lineups, I think with like kind of like unbedded Tier 2 Danish players and just kind of throwing them in the deep end immediately. That's also on Astralis' fault. So some unlucky parts, some parts their own making.
There are even rumors about the organization having severe financial issues and even maybe going bankrupt. Talk to me a bit about that.
Actually, I feel pretty negative about that. I don't think that any organization that spends as much money as Astralis should be rewarded with failure. Even if they are placing their funds in the wrong ways, it's not good for the Counter-Strike ecosystem for teams that invest millions of dollars to go bankrupt. They should be getting something back. I'm not saying that they did everything right with that money, but to see it, if that happens to a legacy brand like Navi, all of us would be in tatters and we'd feel pretty bad about that.
So some of the criticism and the flag Astralis is getting by the community, is that justified, do you think?
It can absolutely be justified because there were moves that Astralis made with that money which were bad, but it's a shame for the scene that we can't, that the scene, you can invest that much and do so badly. And also I think that it's bad for Denmark as a whole, because if the entire, like, I was on an airplane here talking to the guy sitting next to me, and when I mentioned Counter-Strike and esports, he said, oh, like Astralis. So having a brand lose so much face in such a short amount of time is undoubtedly bad. It's bad for the space, because if that brand falls off a cliff, if it goes bankrupt, if it just becomes defunct, well, then all the Danish fans and casual fans don't know what to do next. They might just leave the space entirely. I don't think people, and if people, their only attachment to Counter-Strike is through Astralis, then they just vanish and they go on to another game, which is bad for the scene.
So do you think it could help the team maybe if they get new owners and a fresh start?
Yes. I mean, everything that was happening in that organization for the last 2, 3, maybe even longer years, ever since their era, since 2020 or so, has been bad. It's all been bad. So, well, they qualified for one Antwerp. I think Antwerp was the last one. Everything after that has just been the slow downtrend for them. So if they get new ownership, if they have new ideas, if they are more business savvy, and they're not going to just throw $2 million on 2 players who aren't really in their own right stars, but were more so system players that benefited from playing in that, then maybe they can actually upend this and rewrite it so that Astralis can regain some of its former glory.
You mentioned new ideas and new routes for them. Should they consider paving away from this being this fully Danish project?
No, I don't think that's actually a good idea. I think that that Denmark their unwavering support for Astralis is because Denmark has shown an unwavering support for Danish Counter-Strike. Even if they're not picking up the next up player all the time or as quickly as they should, or maybe they're investing too much in people who are over the hump in terms of their career, it's still it's an all-Danish project. It's remaining an all-Danish project. That's why this country supports them, and that's why there's still so much brand value there.
But is there enough talent in Denmark for doing that?
I think you just have to look a little bit harder. I think also the development, even though they just gave up the Astralis talent, that is supposed to be the pipeline to foster talent with proper coaching staff, proper resources. Seeing them give up Astralis talent means to me that they, one, need to just cut the budget more. It's more that they have to cut the budget more than anything. I think that there has to be Danish talent out there. I'm not the one scouting it. I'm not working for Astralis, but I'm sure somebody with the right mindset should be able to find it.
Let's look back a bit, because cadiaN was brought in last season as a rifling IGL, but has now been axed. How do you see that roster change and the entire situation looking back?
I wanted HooXi from the get-go. I wanted HooXi immediately for the team. I never wanted cadiaN to be the guy on them, because for cadiaN systems to work, especially on the CT side, he needs to be the opper. If I have to imagine any clash was going on the team, is probably the way cadiaN wanted the op used and the way that Device plays, because it's impossible to argue with Device's statistical output, but it still might not serve the system that cadiaN envisions, and then you have two of the pillar pieces of a roster butting heads in, they think it should be like this, and he thinks it should be like that.
Yeah, you mentioned HooXi. You wanted him from the get-go, but he's there now. Talk to me about him and his addition to the team.
Well, he's already worked with Yabby and found success with Copenhagen Flames. He was the guy that put Yabby on the map. Also, he plays a more sacrificial element, but in a way that makes just a little bit more sense. cadiaN tried to emulate that with his play, frequently purchasing the MP9, MAC-10, being selfless in the space taking. Well, HooXi won tournaments doing it, whereas cadiaN was trying to mold himself in that sort of style. But HooXi's been there. He's done it before. He should be able to improve their CT sides in my eyes, because he also knows how to anchor better. cadiaN was never a good anchor. He was, in fact, always trying to, he was almost sneakily trying to buy the double op as much as he could, just to cover up the fact that he doesn't know how to play with a rifle or an SMG on a solo bomb site. HooXi knows exactly what he's doing. He knows how to block with utility. He knows how to slow opponents down. He knows how to buy time for people like Yabby, Stound to rotate in. So he's going to be better. The weirdly enough, I think the defense is going to be one of the biggest improvements for this team, as opposed to HooXi. I don't even think HooXi's necessarily going to call that much better than cadiaN. I think he just knows how to play a defensive side way better.
But you're not worried about HooXi's individual level. I know that cadiaN didn't put up that good a level in Astralis, but you're not worried about that?
Oh, I'm always worried about HooXi's level. That's why at the end of his run with G2, I was like, okay, he needs to go at this point too. But it's just like, the baseline for me with G2 and why HooXi needed to leave there was because G2 was a top 3, top 4 team in the world, and so he just didn't fit on a roster of that caliber. Can he improve Astralis from a team that doesn't qualify to a major, is roughly, in my eyes, 15th or 16th in the world, to getting into the top 8? That's where I think HooXi can definitely help them. I don't know if they're going to be a championship contender, but the goal isn't championship contender for Astralis tomorrow. It's to be a team that's in the world's top 12 comfortably, so you make it to the major.
Here and then I also want to talk a bit about Device, because what is the situation with him, and what do you hope for him in this Astralis team and in general?
Truthfully, I just hope Device is just consistently healthy. I hate when he has to leave because of health reasons. I can't really knock a guy for health or anything like that, because if I were feeling what he felt, who knows, maybe I would have wanted to take a break. So there has to be some empathy granted to a guy like that, where I'm not aware of his situation and how bad it is. I don't really think that there needs to be. It's up to Astralis and him to figure out what works for his comfort, his ability, and for him to have sustainability.
But do you think, in a way, that he deserves something better than this Astralis side?
Not really. Also, I don't think he deserves anything better when he had to leave. If he has to leave for one major and some of the downfall can be pinned on him for not going to the Shanghai RMR, then this seems like a fitting situation for him. His statistical output in the last 4 or 5 months has been good and probably merits a better team in that respect, but it's hard to build a system when a guy comes in and out of a team.
Last question. Is there any reason to be optimistic or hopeful as an Astralis fan?
It can't get much worse, can it?